Hello there, I'm Jen and I make innovative English Lit study videos on Shakespeare, poetry, fiction, literary ideas and more to help you become a literary expert. So if that sounds like what you need, then make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you never miss out on my future weekly videos. In today's video, I am introducing you all to a new way of thinking about studying novels or long narrative texts. That is, to think about a narrative as a data set and each word as a data unit. Now, what do I mean by that? Here's a big caveat though. Nothing replaces the value and experience of reading a novel ourselves and to view it as a work of artistic human expression. But with the rise of advanced AI, there is room for us to consider applying some technological creativity to our process of analyzing a narrative work. And this doesn't at all have to be mutually exclusive with the act of enjoying and reading a book. When it comes to analyzing a novel or a longer work, a common issue I've noticed in student essays is the lack of holistic engagement with the entire text's language and structure. Because a lot of students tend to just pick one or at most a couple of separate moments from the text, and then they would extrapolate a broad argument about the author's use of language, dialogue, or description just based on those selected disparate moments, when the case is almost always much more nuanced. There's a place for close reading prose passages, which is probably when we are doing textual commentary essays, but when it comes to those big topic theme and prompt-based essays, taking such a localized approach isn't really going to work, and it risks coming across as careless, lazy preparation. So ideally, students would have detailed insights into how often certain words are used throughout a text, whether there are any shifts in narrative voice or chronology, and at exactly which point in the narrative these shifts happen, in order to make a judicious comment about how an author uses diction or structure that takes into consideration the entirety of the text. But doing this could take a lot of time, I know, as students would have to pore over each and every page, making notes of every instance a word appears or whenever a point of view shifts. And I know just how onerous that can be, to the extent where, well, most students would just not bother doing it. Now, however, there is AI to the rescue, where we can use a large language model to scan an entire text for exactly how often a word or phrase appears when there's a structural or narrative change, and produce that observation in seconds. This means that we can now take that information and get down to what really matters, the why and the analysis. So in the rest of this video, I'm going to first show you how you can use AI to find useful, quantifiable information about a long literary text, like a novel. Then I'm going to illustrate how you can integrate that information in your own analysis. So the first text I'm going to use is the popular GCSE novella A Christmas Carol by Dickens, which is famous for being a cautionary tale about greed and miserliness through Scrooge's journey of repentance. The protagonist, Scrooge, starts off by being this mean, stingy employer who begrudges his clerk, Bob Cratchit, for taking even one day's worth of holiday off, right, which is Christmas Day. But throughout the rest of the novel, Scrooge is visited by the three ghosts of his past, present, and future, who show him visions that evoke a deep sense of remorse, reflection, and eventually repentance, which motivate him to turn a new leaf and become this good Samaritan. So say I want to make this point in an essay about how Dickens shows Scrooge's character transformation in the novel. How would I be able to illustrate this with reference to Dickens' use of diction and to take into consideration his use of diction across the entire novel? Well, we can ask the AI to scan the entire text and identify the pattern with which different types of diction, such as emotive and commercial diction, appear throughout the chapters, like this. Attached is the full text of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I'm currently studying the text for my GCSE English Lit exams, and I'd like to dive deeper into the structural design of the novel. Provide me with the information to the questions below based on the document I have provided. In which chapter is there the most and least number of emotive words? An emotive word would be any word that conveys a feeling. In which chapter is there the most and least amount of words and descriptions about money, commerce, and wealth. Now, because A Christmas Carol is a public domain text, chances are you probably won't even really need to attach the PDF of the entire text for the AI to be able to crawl through it, but providing the AI with a specific source to reference is probably going to increase my chances of getting a better answer. So I'm just going to do that right here, and let's see what the AI says. So the AI here has observed that chapter 1 contains the fewest emotive words and the most amount of diction relating to money and wealth, whereas chapter 4 contains the most emotive words and the least amount of commercial diction. This makes perfect sense given the narrative development, because the novel shows how Scrooge gradually changes from being a money-minded miser to a compassionate, generous man who is capable of feeling deep sorrow for the unfortunate, like little Tim, feel joy for contributing to others' happiness, and remorse for having led a life of selfishness. So we can use this observation about the development and distribution of emotive and commercial diction as a piece of evidence to support our point about Scrooge's character transformation. This is much more convincing than if we were to just say something like, Dickens invokes a lot of money-related phrases like pay a day's wages for no work, stop half a crown, pick a man's pocket, when he grudgingly agrees to Bob Cratchit taking Christmas Day off in chapter 1, but then eventually raises Cratchit's salary at the end. Because these are much more surface level, localized observations, whereas if we were to consider the overall concentration of diction types throughout the text, we are really giving thought to the author's craft and engaging with the novel as a whole. So you see then that I've reframed the way I see words as data, and that the composition of a narrative as a compendium of data units that we can glean insights from. Now, this is an interesting way to rethink textual analysis, because from considering aspects like how often a certain type of word or theme is featured in different points of a text, we can glean surprising ideas from the relative weighting of a type of word or a specific technique into the development and changes of a narrative. And by considering what relationship there might be between shifts in style and structure, if there are any throughout a text, we can come up with new interpretations about the text that we have previously not been able to do as easily unless we're doing extended research on a specific text, because this process would have taken us a lot of time, which, of course, most students just would not bother spending. Now, another way to use AI to expand our scope of consideration when sourcing evidence from a text is by asking it to quickly identify moments of narrative shifts, like flashback, flash forward, fragmented, frame narratives, etc. Unless we've taken meticulous notes in the process of reading a text, chances are we would have forgotten or missed out on moments and points where there's a narrative or chronological shift. We can also dig deeper into more detailed aspects of the text's composition by asking the AI about the relative distribution of dialogue and description throughout the chapters of a novel, which could tell us something about the shifts between the external, social, and internal psychological focus of a narrative, or even the average length of sentences in each chapter, which might give us insights into the pacing of a narrative. Shorter sentence-heavy chapters might be faster, and vice versa, and what that might reflect about, say, the mental and emotional state of a narrator or a character. So here, I'm going to use John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men as our text for this example, partly because it's a narrative with quite a lot of flashback moments and syntactical contrast, but also because it is a GCSE level text. Let's try and ask our AI exactly those three questions and see what it comes up with. Attached is the full text of Steinbeck's novel Of Mice and Men. I'm currently studying the text for my GCSE English Lit exams, and I'd like to dive deeper into the structural design of the novel. Provide me with information to the questions below based on the document I have provided. Which chapter features the most and least amount of dialogue? A dialogue would be indicated by double quotation marks around a phrase or sentence. Which chapter contains the longest and shortest sentences on average? Identify all the moments where there is flashback and flash forward, and specify from whose perspective these moments are featured. Now notice that right away, the AI has identified 4 flashback moments in chapters 1, 3, 4, and 5, as well as a flash forward-like moment in chapter 4, where Candy, Lenny, and Crooks talk about their dream of land ownership. And from this, we can construct an argument about how the multiple flashbacks reinforce a sense of nostalgia, but also a sense of relief, as various characters like George, Crooks, and Curly's wife look back on their past and consider the troubles they had once experienced and this current new life they've pursued as an embodiment of the hope for a better future. The observation that chapter 1 contains the longest average sentences, while chapters 3 to 4 contain the shortest, could also shed light on Steinbeck's dramatic pacing. With chapter 1 slowly setting the scene of a sleepy Salinas landscape with the more drawn-out periodic descriptive sentences, then building up eventually to chapters 3 and 4, in which the sentences are the shortest, where the rising action happens with various characters like Crooks, Lenny, Candy, and Curly's wife interacting and eventually leading up to the fateful clash between Lenny and Curly's wife. We see then that there is a parallel between sentence length, which of course contributes to syntactical pacing, and the narrative arc, which contributes to dramatic pacing and development. And by making this observation, we'll be demonstrating a much more holistic engagement of how different elements in a text synergize to create its overall impact on the reader. So in the past, gaining such detailed insight into a novel's overall narrative design was virtually impossible without spending hours on meticulous note-taking, which I, again, bet very few students would bother doing. But now, with AI having the ability to provide this information in literally seconds, we are opening up a new bank of textual observations to support and deepen our analysis. And using AI to interpret narrative text is going to be even more useful for texts that are much longer and much more complex than something like Christmas Carol or Of Mice and Men, such as James Joyce's Ulysses, or even an epic poem like John Milton's Paradise Lost. But these are texts that are probably more relevant if you do A-level or university level English. So the big takeaway from this exercise isn't that AI is amazing because it can count the number of words in each chapter or identify all the narrative shifts in a long literary text, but rather is that it enables us to engage with the entirety of longer texts much easier by giving us instant information about the stylistic, thematic, and narrative patterns and developments across a whole work. Now, with this insight, we can then develop much more holistic, convincing interpretations of our text, and in turn make better arguments that take into consideration the work's full scope. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on using AI this way, so please comment below to share, and of course I would encourage you to try this out on some of the texts that you're studying and see what insights it produces for your next essay. For more AI learning videos, check out this playlist right here, and if you're interested in learning more about how you can use AI to level up your studies, please sign up in the early access form below and I'll reach out with more details very soon. As always, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you found this video helpful in any way, so that you can encourage me to keep making these useful English Lit study videos every week. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and click that subscribe button below and switch on the bell notifications so you never miss out on my future weekly videos. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.